Okay, we're live, but there's no one there. Hey, Manju, do you happen to have our header, beacon header, that we could put on the agenda? I switched computers, so I don't have it on my desktop anymore. Thank you.
Can you see if anybody's in?
No, I can't see anybody.
Okay.
Manju, I'll go ahead and share the document with you real quick.
Okay, we'll fix this.
Amazing, good job. All right, feel free to edit that with me as I put it up, or as I work on how to put it up. Share screen. Oh.
Will it take your face away?
I don't know. Let's see. You tell me. An application, a Chrome tab. I can't tell. Do you have to allow it? Because what I can see is you, me at the bottom is a thumbnail, the agenda at the bottom is a thumbnail, and then you're in a show. Everyone can see and hear you.
I can't see the agenda though.
Can you see it now?
No.
Sharing this, it says it's shared, but I don't know. So there's something on StreamYard that I don't know how to do.
Share the agenda.
Can you send it to me?
Can you send it to me really quick?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, hold on. I'm sorry. I said, hang on. Tell him I'm adding it.
He's adding it.
Okay. Oh, he's the administrator in the background.
She just said it.
Duh.
I wonder how I get that off, like the heading off, to make it just a document, just like a screen rather than.
View.
Hmm?
Then you go to view.
Go to view.
View.
Viewing.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, so I have to.
Dismiss.
I guess that's good enough, right?
Yeah. We look, this is new for all of us. So I'm sure we have people who are on. So good afternoon, everyone. And We are still figuring out how to do this. I guess our next Q&A will perfect it and get better each time we go live. But I will let you go ahead and open it up for us, Katie.
Thanks, Shanice. Hi, everyone. My name is Katy Chibb. I am a co-founder of Beacon Education Solutions. I'm here this afternoon with Shanice, who is one of our consultants and contractors as an advocate. She works a lot within Baltimore County in Maryland. We're here today to talk about the pandemic, what parents are facing in terms of navigating the IEP process with the pandemic, and just special education in general. And I'm going to go ahead and give her an opportunity to introduce herself, and then we will talk about her experience.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shanice Hendricks. I am a parent advocate working with Beacon Education Solutions. I am a mom of 4, and one in particular who's in 2nd grade, who is currently receiving an IEP through Baltimore County Public Schools. And I'm just here to share with everyone my experience, to show just unity and that you're not alone, because it has been very challenging during this process in general, and then the added layer of stress during the pandemic. So I certainly am glad we're able to host this Q&A, and please type in the chat if you have any questions and comments, and just feel free to chime in.
Okay, so Shanice, let's talk about what you are looking at with your child, and you can talk about your experience with all your children as well. It's you definitely have a comparison when you're working with one child that has an IEP, and even in the same grade another child that doesn't have an IEP, or disabilities that you need to attend to between you and the school. What have you noticed that has changed with the pandemic, and what maybe has there been any advantages of the pandemic? Have you noticed any benefits?
I guess what has changed is everybody's adjustment to being on virtual, like being online and virtual, and the way that we communicate, and just how involved parents have to now become in helping children with learning and education. So aside from having a child who has an IEP, if you're a parent during virtual learning, you know that you kind of have to step in and be the teacher's aide in a sense, and step in and support and help, and just keep track of what's going on in class during the time, some asynchronous time as we have in Baltimore County. And then some of the small meetings, and helping kids get acclimated to actually logging into the systems that they use. So if you have young children, it's hard because they kind of have to learn how to log on and to read what's available to them. I will say the biggest advantage is I'm able to see firsthand what my child is doing, how they are receiving the information, and what they need to move forward. And I think the benefit of being in the pandemic right now with virtual learning, especially with my son and his IEP, is that I really get to see if the IEP is being implemented. It's a easier way for me to collect data or be able to ask questions, or to see if he's even making progress. When we were in school, I had to have a lot of trust and faith in the teachers, the special educator, that what they were doing with him in class was actually happening. And being at home, I kind of get this insight on where he is, if he's making progress, and if his goals are really attainable or appropriate for what he needs. And I think that's the benefit a lot of parents have, especially with a child who has an IEP. You really get to see firsthand, is everything that was written in the IEP really happening? If it's not happening, then that rings some alarm. Or if the progress that they said your child is making, if they can't do it in front of you, then that's a red flag. Where are they really making progress? Is this really appropriate? So it's a lot, but of course there's a lot of stress. Of course, there is a lot of changes and modifications, I would say, that probably have happened that a lot of people aren't aware of. We're hit with a lot of fatigue. We're hit with a lot of screen time. And if you're working from home or outside of the home, I'm sure that it's just overwhelming. So in that breath too, it's hard to keep up and manage, especially when you have multiple children.
Yeah, and when you're also keep holding down a full-time job. It's just a lot. And many parents are playing the role of teacher as well. It was just, parents aren't necessarily trained for. And when you throw a student with an IEP in the mix, that's a different type of teaching. It's a different type of specialization often. So it is very overwhelming. And that is one of the things that we're hearing from our clients, that everybody's overwhelmed. And we're hearing it from teachers too. I mean, teachers by nature are overwhelmed just with the teaching profession, but it is not easy for anybody right now. I think one of the big thrusts of the message we want to convey today is that it is hard for everybody. But, and you said it best yesterday, Shanice, you said you can't over communicate with the school. Communication is how you're going to be able to progress your child forward. When it comes to working with a student with an IEP, a teacher typically will report out on how a child is doing with data and things like that 4 times a year. By law, that's all they're required to do, is 4 times a year. And that's, in conjunction with a report card. But now that things have changed so drastically, and parents are having to field all of these things that they've never had to deal with before in terms of supporting their child, we're really supporting communication often, much more often. Shanice, how are you communicating with your teachers, and how are your child's teachers and the other administrators? How are you keeping the lines of communication open?
Certainly via email. That's the number one thing. I do communicate a lot via email. I do have a relationship with some of the teachers, and then it's really easier to text or to use Class Tag. That's a platform that we use to communicate for instant messaging. So I do a lot of communicating that way. And then sometimes if I'm unable to communicate that day, or if there's something going on, I will record my son in class, not with other students, but specifically when he has his services, just to make sure that if there are questions or concerns that I have about how he's doing or how he's accessing the information, or if there are accommodations being met, I will record it and come back to it and then shoot the team an email. So that's really how I have planned to do it. I do take notes. Sometimes I will take his work and screenshot it on my phone and then send it in an email as well, or a text, and just say, this is what was done today. I have a few questions, or was this right? I think the hardest thing is not intervening. I find myself like struggling, not helping, because I want him to do well. So I find myself having to pull back a lot so that I can really see if he's getting what he needs. It's easy for me to sit down and do math with him, but I also will give him everything under the sun to give him the answers. But is that really what he needs? So over communication, there's no such thing. I think that whichever way you feel comfortable with is important to do when you are communicating, and you're a part of the team as a parent. And I think sometimes we forget as parents that we have an equal part. Our expertise is not education per se, it's our child. And so we're all here to support our children. So over communicating and data gathering is necessary for your participation in the IEP meetings and as a team member for your child. So whichever way you feel comfortable, use technology to your advantage. Use whatever resources you have to your advantage. Ask in your child's session without other children, if that's possible. Ask if that session can be recorded so that you all can have that discussion and you can look to see if things are being met.
Yeah, you touched on data keeping yourself, which is something very new for parents. Traditionally, an IEP, if a child has an IEP, progress monitoring is required in that IEP. And we kind of touched on that before with the 4 times a year reporting out. But now that parents have a chance to see their child at home and witness what's going on and support however they can, there's also that opportunity to progress monitor, to keep data. And it can be very complex, or it can be very simple. It can be as simple as printing out a calendar and writing in, this is what happened today, on the date. Progress monitoring can sound very, very intimidating, but we encourage parents to keep their own data, especially during this time, because educators are having a difficult time with it too, not seeing children in person.
Absolutely. And I would, one suggestion that I have that's really worked for me, I have an ongoing Word document and I put a date there every day. Sometimes I don't get to it the whole day. Let's be real. I work full time, I have kids. So, but maybe at the end of the week, if I've taken notes, I will add some of the progress notes that I feel were important to share, good and bad.
Yeah,
It's hard.
can go right in. That kind of stuff can go right into the IEP.
Mhm.
Just because you're the parent, like you said, you're an equal team member, and really, an IEP team should consider what you see as data, and they will. And you mentioned the communication a lot too. We recommend that all communication have some type of paper trail. We really, really harp on that. So we've definitely got educators that prefer to talk, on the phone. I do. What is your experience with communication, and how can a parent ensure that communications have some kind of paper trail? What is your mechanism for keeping a paper trail after communicating with school staff?
So if I'm on the phone talking with school staff, the first thing I do is after we get off the phone, I will send an immediate email just to wrap up and sum up the conversation. That gives you an opportunity to correct any things that may have been miscommunicated or weren't understood, or if you have follow-up tasks. But that is a way to track that the conversation actually did happen. It's very important that you have a record that you did speak with someone, service provider, a teacher, special educator, whomever. Keep a record of that. If you are a little bit uncomfortable with that, I would recommend not even talking on the phone. You can send an email, you can send a message through if your school has a platform for instant messaging. I would suggest doing that just so that you are able to have on hand what the teachers, educators have said and what you have said. And you always have a place of reference.
Mhm.
It's really important that you keep that paper trail, because when you come back to the team meeting, you can say, we just had this discussion. I have some concerns, or I don't have some concerns. Or at the team meeting and you're reviewing data, their progress notes may not match your progress notes. And so there's a discrepancy that you may need to discuss. Or you can say, I need for you to show me more, give me more information about what you're tracking and keeping. And another way is to also just send an email to say, can you provide me with information of my child's progress this week? That way you don't really have to take the notes. You can just get that information and then review it and say, I don't agree with this, or this is not what I saw happen. Can we schedule a time to hold a team to discuss this a little bit further?
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. Before we jump into Q&A, this is something we're hearing a lot from clients and other people in Maryland, is services have changed after the pandemic struck. So there was a big scurry and a lot of things happening in March, April, May. Obviously, schools, this is unprecedented. Schools didn't know what to do. We even had some clients who had IEP sent home without the new IEP sent home without the IEP happening. So we had some crazy stuff that we've heard about happening. Have you had your child's services change at all since the pandemic struck? What has it been like in terms of navigating what was actually written in his IEP pre-pandemic and what's going on now?
So when the pandemic first happened, I would say maybe May or June, there was a request to modify, or there was a notice sent home that there would be modifications to services, and that I would be signing this document to waive that I agreed with the modifications of services. And then this was done without holding a team. I refused to do so because it was no clarity around what was going to happen. So the first few months of the pandemic, it was all over the place. And I mean, parents are patient people. Like, we're patient. We're all living this pandemic. So in my mind, it was, well, we're not doing anything. And now you want to modify the service because at that point they were just logging into class for maybe an hour or two a day. And so at this point, you want to modify services, but you're not saying what you're going to do in the interim. So when you modify, what's the alternative? So for me, I did not agree to sign it without holding a team, and I needed more clarity and information. And we were able to hold a team. And I was in agreement that some of his services, such as physical therapy and occupational therapy, had to be adjusted because they couldn't come into the home and they couldn't physically be with him. But of course, that was after advocating to speak and have some discussion around it. Department of Education made it very clear in the beginning that there was no reason why services should stop or be altered during the pandemic. So it really was up to educators in the school and the districts and the offices of special education to figure out how can we do this in a virtual setting? What do kids need? And, as much as you don't want to put things on parents, it may have to fall on parents to support and become, partners in this journey during the pandemic.
As long as parents receive the training.
As long as you receive the training, as long as there's discussion. I don't think, unfortunately, I've heard that there were a lot of waivers and modifications of services sent out to parents without IEPs. That's a big no-no.
Okay. Put in the chat, Shanice, what Disability Rights in Maryland has published on that. And like you said, there has been no change in FAPE, in ID, the federal laws in regards to the pandemic. Nothing happened to change it. So if your child's IEP has changed and you didn't agree to those services, there's some backpedaling that needs to be.
Yes.
No laws have changed.
Absolutely. And it's okay. It's okay to adjust to make the circumstances work, but that doesn't mean at the expense of the child. It doesn't mean that they should not have modifications. So if your child has an additional adult or one-to-one, it really just means that they may need to have separate time and access to the child during the virtual learning in a different way. Or if there's occupational therapy services, I know, for example, for Kaz, we have occupational therapy. His OT will send the documents for him to do cutouts. So it's my responsibility to print it out. That's fine. But it should never be a modification saying that we're not going to provide the services because we can't give you the supplies. There has to be some brainstorming, which is why you need a team. Unfortunately, and I hope nobody has experienced it, but I'm sure it's happened. Please don't waive anything if you have not had a team. Please don't sign over anything if you have not held a team. It's okay to ask questions. You have the right to ask questions. And then don't beat yourself up if things have happened because it's like we were in a time warp too in the beginning of the school year, right? March through April, and then even now in September, because we didn't know what it would look like. And so even if you sign something or receive documentation, it's not too late to go back and advocate and say that you want to discuss what has happened. I really think that's very, very important. And the link you posted will be helpful to parents navigating this process. Winter break is coming up, so it's a time to regroup and refresh. But certainly just kind of keep an eye out on what's going on with those documents that you're receiving.
Thank you. And we will speak to the extension of changes in service a little bit later on, but I want to open it up now to public. I can't see if we have anybody viewing, but this is a good time if anybody is viewing to go ahead and put questions in the chat. And until we see those, I'm just going to keep talking about the next big thrust. So we've talked about the importance of communication and keeping in mind that at this time you cannot over communicate with the educators who are supporting your child. We've talked about how to create a paper trail and the importance of creating a paper trail. And we've talked about that just because there's a pandemic, it doesn't mean that your child's services should have changed drastically. There is something in the law that there's guidance that has come out, and the guidance has just said if the services can't conceivably be given at home, for example, a nurse giving your child a prescription medication at 3 o'clock every day before she puts him on the bus. That can't conceivably be done at home. So things like that. But things like occupational therapy, like Shanice said, physical therapy, most related services, and certainly special education can be delivered at home with some brainstorming and resourceful thinking. Let's talk about prior written notice. If you see that services have changed and you don't understand why, prior written notice is your key. Prior written notice is a confusing term because it sounds like it's supposed to come before anything happens, but it's a mechanism that protects parents from changes being made to the services or the IEP without their knowledge. So anytime a change is made in an IEP, meaning that affects a child's services or placement, and we have to keep in mind placement is not a place, it's a set of services. So really any type of change to services, the school has to send home the prior written notice. In Baltimore County, they call it team notes. There's team summaries I've heard in other counties. In other states, prior written notice only came, it came as like an agenda after a meeting. There's all different types of forms, but the salient piece of what prior written notice is that it's an explanation of why a change is being made, and that adds and augments the paper trail. So let's say you've had your IEP team, you've agreed to changes, you've talked through everything and you're feeling good. You go home and your child comes and reports that a change has been made. They're not receiving services that you thought they were going to receive, and you didn't know anything about it. That's your time to pull out the prior written notice and go over it again and see what the explanation is. And if you disagree with what's on the prior written notice, you're a parent with an equal right to participate in the IEP as the other team members. You just call up the IEP team chair and whoever is in charge of the case management and say, I don't agree with this prior written notice. We need to rework this, or we need to have another IEP team to completely rework it. I want to throw up the best resource I found on prior written notice too. Shanice, you mentioned that Wright's Law has a really good
Yeah, Wright's Law has a good explanation of it, but I think in order to just manage prior written notice is one to ask your team what the title of their prior written notice is. So that way going forward, you know what documents you're receiving, you're able to decipher which is what. And prior written notice is not just a quick text or email from the special educator or the teacher. It has to be something that's a little bit more formal. So parents need to know what to look for. So it's perfectly okay to send an email or chat and say, what do you call your prior written notice? Like if I'm looking for my documents, what is the title? Because this is a formal document. That's really, really good to keep track of. And of course, if you don't agree and you have a lot of questions, follow up with an email and say you want to have a team. Try to hold a team. You can hold a team as many times as you need to throughout the year. I know sometimes parents are not really aware of that, not aware that they can modify. The IEP can be modified before the annual review. But prior written notice is really, really important, but we have to get the language together. I think, unfortunately, when we're in this world of trying to navigate the IEP by ourselves as parents, and even navigating it sometimes with support, there's so many different, it's like so much language surrounding an IEP. You can Google, you'll get 20 searches, and that information may say 20 different things. But I guess the main thing to know is just to communicate with your school, your district, and ask them what terminology they use. Mm-hmm. That way you can just have an idea and be aware of what's going on. And then you know if you've gotten it. So if you haven't gotten it, then the next step is you've made a modification. There was no prior written notice. We need to backtrack and implement the services. And then we can hold a team if you feel that there needs to be a change. And this is just all about parent empowerment. A lot of parents are not empowered and really don't know. It's an overwhelming process. Mm-hmm. The IEP is a journey. It's a marathon. It is not going to be an easy and simple start to finish. Sometimes it is, but in my experience, it's certainly nothing that ends when the school year ends and begins when the school year starts. So you just have to really know what you're looking for. And I know we don't know what we're looking for.
Right. Okay. So as an advocate, and I was a former IEP chair as well, and I don't know how many IEP meetings I've held in the past, hundreds. What you're looking for is after the IEP meeting is held, go home. In Maryland, the requirement is within 5 days that prior written notice, team summary, team notes, whatever, comes home, and you have a final draft of your IEP that you recognize because you discussed it in the meeting. And you have basically a summary of what happened and anything that has been changed. Benny's services were modified from 1 hour a week to a half an hour a week because with it, the reason that that was discussed and agreed upon in the team, and of course backed up with data, that is outlined well. I've definitely with clients seen some prior written notices that come home with 3 sentences. We held the meeting, we agreed, and that's it. And that's not okay. That is not what IDEA outlines when they describe the spirit of this thing. The purpose of the prior written notice is so that there is a paper trail of we got to point A we got to point B because we went through point A first and we did our due diligence. Should be able to see that throughout the child's IEP history. That prior written notice is really key, especially in states like Maryland where the parent doesn't have veto power. If a parent says, I'm not going to sign this IEP because I disagree with it, the school can go, oh, no, we're gonna, not in that voice, but the school can still go ahead and implement the IEP without parent permission. So the prior written notice is really a power.
Extremely important. And understanding what data is also not because we can't do it because this district or the school has decided that this service can be conducted on this day. That is not data. That is not a good enough explanation. And if you receive any type of information saying that because it's not conducive for this day or can't be held this day, that's a red flag. And it's certainly a red flag for you to probably consult with an advocate. And depending on how deep in everything you are, just to find some time to have someone else who's a little bit more objective to look at your documentation. But these are easy things that you can do that don't require a lot of time for you to sit down and try to thumb through it and feel through it. And also put the responsibility back on the school. As a parent, you are a parent. You were not the educator. You don't have insight and access on to what the school does day to day in that regard. So it's important for you to, if you have a question, and say, can you explain this to me? I need help. I need for you to say it to me so that I can understand. I know that I've received notifications saying that, we're not going to complete services on a particular day because we've been told that we have to conduct meetings at this time.
Oh yeah, no.
Well, that has nothing to do with my child. So make it make sense. I'm pushing back on it. And how is that? What data have we gathered to say that he doesn't need this services, especially if during the IEP team we're showing that he needs as much time as possible to receive what he needs. So it becomes very complex. But it doesn't have to be. I think that's another thing that's important as a parent to stress. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. It is overwhelming. It's very intimidating to be a part of an IEP team. It's very intimidating to receive all the information, especially in the pandemic when nobody knows what's going on. Everybody's trying to figure it out. It's overwhelming to just receive it. And then you're like, okay, so what do I do? What does this mean? And it's easy just to kind of walk away from it. Or it's easy to, really go in aggressive mode. And, so it's like, let's build this partnership. Let's take a breath, ask as many questions as you need to. As we stated earlier, over communication is no such thing during this time. You have to over communicate, and it's okay to ask questions.
And it's okay, definitely.
It's okay to ask questions.
Those questions in writing. Good thing. Just you have it to look back on, and that all adds to that page.
And it's okay if you don't want to talk on the phone. I think during this time in particular, I have strayed away from talking on the phone because I need to see it in writing, because that is my protection for my child and myself. So I don't want to talk on the phone after I've sent you an email and you call me and you want the explanation. I don't want to do that just because. Just like teachers are overwhelmed, parents are overwhelmed. You have multiple children. I have twins in second grade. We have a 6th grader and then a toddler. So I sometimes can't focus on the phone and listen to everything that's going on, especially if it's something that's concerning my child's IEP. So I wanted in writing, hey, I'm sorry I'm unable to speak. Is there a way that we can put this in writing? And you can do dictation to text. It's really simple. So it's not, it's ways to, it's like, what do you say? Something that's not, how do you say it? Something about skinning a cat, but it's just multiple ways to get to something. Yeah.
Okay, I want to give another invite to whomever might be tuning in. Go ahead, and if there are any questions, please feel free to put them in our chat box. We will start answering as we see them. Other than that, we're just going to keep on talking about what we're seeing right now in the pandemic and throw out some other red flags. Shanice, you had a good one there with we're going to stop giving services on today. That is just not okay. From what I know about your child's IEP, doesn't he have services 5 times a week anyway?
He does have services 5 times a week.
Okay.
So, that's something that we are getting into having some serious questions about, because what the school has kind of dictated for their teachers during this time really doesn't have any bearing on what we have set for the IEP. This is an individualized education plan. So this is like specific to him. Mm-hmm. And my thing is, if we're going to modify services because we need an adjustment, I'm flexible. So if we can't do it on this particular day, let's make sure we add an extra hour or two to another day to make sure we're getting it. But we're not going to completely eliminate it because of their scheduling.
This is a very important thing to watch out for. When, as we've said, teachers, schools are overworked. Teachers often doing the job of 2 people, and an administrator is often doing the job of 4 people. It's just crazy. When you're going into teaching that you're about to, but one thing that is important for parents to understand, especially in states like this one, Maryland, or in public education, which is typically a student with an IEP is in some type of public school, is that mandates and decrees can be district-wide, or policies can be. So if your school is saying we can't because the district doesn't do this, that's also a red flag. Mm-hmm. It might not be that the requirement is coming from the school, the change is coming from the school. It might be a district thing, but FAPE and IDEA are still stronger than the district, no matter what district it is in the states. So your child's IEP still makes him eligible for those rights that are listed in IDEA. So a district can't just take away Wednesdays for instruction listed in your child's IEP. They have, and not have an IEP team to discuss it. It is individualized.
And it's okay if you receive that type of information, because who's in the Office of Special Education is public knowledge, right? So you can go on your school's website. It is okay to loop representatives from the department, from your Office of Special Ed into your emails to have a full circle moment about this notification that you've received. They may not be responsive and they may put it on the IEP chair, but that is another way. And it's not to be aggressive. So let me kind of back up. It's not to be aggressive. It's not to get anyone in trouble per se, but it's definitely to build a partnership and have some sense of accountability during this team process. It's a way for us to say, I received this notification from our school. I need more clarity, because I know that we are protected under IDEA and FAPE. This is not happening, but is there a way that we can have a discussion, you and I and a team? Is there a representative that can come in? And sometimes when you have those conversations, you get the explanation that you need. You'll get, oh, you're right. I apologize. Let me make sure that this is done correctly. But it also is a way for you to connect and kind of navigate a little differently. I'm big on emailing everybody under the sun for certain questions that I have, just because I don't like for anybody to play messenger. So if you told me that this was the rule, that this information came from the district, I'm going to reach out to them as well and say, can you can you provide some education on this? And also let you know that the school hasn't given us prior written notice. So is there a way we can discuss this? We have a question in the chat. Why do you think a lot of parents decide not to utilize advocacy services for their children with IEPs? Do you think they're unaware of the services you provide?
That's a solid question. So I've been doing advocacy for 3 years publicly and behind the scenes for my whole career. But I found, and I've seen a wonderful handout from Kennedy Krieger, I think, or maybe the state of Maryland made it about a parent's process. A parent goes through their own stages of denial and grief sometimes when they first begin to realize that their child is going to need a lot of extra support than they maybe anticipated. And Shanice can speak to this a lot better than me. Shanice has been navigating this process for a long time, but having to go through that process alone in itself is a journey. And then not having a good resource for ding, ding, ding. I've seen so many red flags. It's time for me to get some help. It's certainly not a Google search. And although schools do and districts and the state does do its due diligence in pushing out information to parents about how to get help, there's the special education resource office often in a district, and there's often parent special education groups for parents that are navigating the process and can help each other. There's just not a manual for it. So how do we help? And also often it comes with a cost. Some states require that advocates do their work for free, pro bono. That is not the case in this state, but our company has a sliding scale. So that's one way that we try to mitigate some of the stress, the financial stress that it can take. I think that it's just a process getting there, and not having that formula or that equation for A plus B makes time to get an advocate.
And it's so overwhelming. I could tell you when we first started, before we even got the IEP process started, and I found myself in a Google search, and I found myself kind of talking to other parents who were going through this process, is daunting. It is so daunting because one, you just kind of Google what you need to do. Like, how do I get an IEP for my child? The searches the information that pops up is so overwhelming, and you're reading it, and it's nothing that's always specific to your state in just a basic Google search.
Yeah.
And then once you get to the process, I think the initial shock is like intimidating. You go to your first IEP team meeting and you are not aware when you send out your notification or when you're invited by the school, you are not aware that it's going to be 5 people. So it's like 5 against you initially. That's what it feels like, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So then everybody introduces themselves. You get to learn who's the specialist and the expert. You have your general educator, and you kind of make your list about who needs to come in the team. But when you're in there and you're starting it, it's daunting and it's overwhelming. And I think that sometimes parents don't even know when do I need an advocate at what point. And it's important in being able to share this as a parent. I think in the very beginning it's important to get an advocate, not because the school is automatically going to do it wrong, but because an advocate can kind of just relieve some of that stress that you were talking about and even help guide you through the one-on-one. I know that at Beacon we are really making sure that we work with parents and help them understand that, let me tell you the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s of an IEP process, right? So, because there may be a time where you won't even have an advocate in your meetings, but you need to know and be armored and geared with what is to come and what do you expect. One thing I certainly have learned over time is that it's not as simple as you think or you may want it to be, but it doesn't have to be that hard. And I think an advocate really kind of helps just put your mind at ease. And we at Beacon really also help you to make sure you build that partnership with your school, because your child has to be there and you want to build a partnership. You want to build great relationships. But I think just number one is overwhelming. And most parents hear all the horror stories, right? So when you talk to another parent, how's your IEP process going? And they're like, oh, it's crazy. Oh, this was my horrible experience. And it is automatically intimidating. And when you're a parent with a child who has special needs, learning challenges, medical challenges, it's already a layer. It's already, some emotional, and I don't want to say baggage, but it's a lot of emotions with that. It's a lot of stress with that in itself. So depending on where you are, you may just say, I can't take on anything else. I don't want to take on anything else. It's really important to have an advocate in the beginning.
Yeah, I just want to give away a little trade secret. Having been on both sides of the table in terms of being school staff, holding IEP meetings, administrator, and also an advocate now, we're intimidated too. When you walk into that meeting, and yes, I can't imagine what it must be like for a parent to walk into that meeting and have the whole meeting be, clinical discussion about their child. And I've certainly been in IEP meetings where that discussion wasn't always very positive. But you're not the only one who's intimidated. It's intimidating process for everybody. And I don't believe there's any one educator out there who believes that they have all the answers. Also, every IEP, it starts with an I, it's individualized. So every process is different and every IEP is different. So the quickest way to get, that the quickest that a team can become a team that's working collaboratively and cohesively, the best is going to be for the child. And an advocate can sometimes bridge that. And, an advocate isn't going in with the emotional connection to everything that the parent has. So that can alleviate, an advocate or a lawyer, if need be, can alleviate some of that.
And it's all about empowering. I think one thing, the IEP team members from the school receive training and professional development, right? Parents don't receive that. We kind of have to navigate that by ourselves. So having an advocate, or if you're at the point where you're having a lawyer, that's also another way for you to receive training, you to receive insight on how things should be, because you are always at a disadvantage when that's not your field of expertise. You don't know what the state laws are when they change. Sometimes you don't know if IDEA changes, right? You don't get that information unless you're really, really looking forward to it. But the educators get professional development to help them with the process as things come up. So it's really important to also just take advantage of an advocate in that way. Like, I want to empower myself as a parent. I want to receive training as a parent so I can best advocate for my child and be a team member. And it's like, you go to the IEP team and they say you are a team member, but you don't really feel like a team member sometimes as a parent. And so, but it's also helpful to hear from you, Katy, that it's not always the parents that are intimidated. It is the administrators as well. So I think it's just a lot of emotion in general, especially I've been in so many IEP team meetings and it has been stressful and they have not always been pleasant. But I think one thing that I will always encourage parents to do is when the emotions come down and like when the smoke clears, just say thank you for listening. Just be, open, even though it's frustrating, even though you might not have gotten what you wanted or you didn't like what was said. Just say thank you for listening. This is my only time I can really vent about what's going on with my child. So,
So I want to plug two things there in response to that. It is totally a parent's right to bring in a support system. It's probably best practices, if there is such a thing, when a parent is coming in as a team member, to let the team know. Certainly let the team know that if you're going to bring somebody in, and certainly let them know if you're going to bring an advocate in 24 hours, 48 hours in advance. But also the federal law requires that every state has at least one parent training center. In the state of Maryland, that's called Parents Place of Maryland, and they're phenomenal. Parents Place is run by parents of students with IEPs who have navigated this process, and they just know everything. They aren't allowed to go in and advocate with a parent, but they're very, very helpful, especially in those beginning stages of understanding what the IEP process is and helping a parent feel empowered and handing that power back to them that was already there. It just doesn't always feel like it.
And I've actually spoken with Parents Place in Maryland, and I will say, even if you are looking for that, but they're also a good place to vent. Because they've been there, and I have probably had 2 and 3 hour long conversations with parents there. It's just a great network and a great way to do that. And we'll certainly put that information in the chat as well.
Okay, anything else that we should cover? Any other questions that you're seeing? I can't see questions on my end, but
No, I don't see questions. I did get a notification that there may be some challenges putting in questions. So
oh dear.
um,
Okay.
yeah, maybe on YouTube, but it's okay. I think we could probably do Google forms next time too, to have questions from parents if we're having some difficulty. This is our first time going live, so this is very, very interesting and fun for us as well.
Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna throw up both my email address right now. This is at Beacon, and I'm just gonna go ahead and put in my phone number too. Anybody is invited to give me a call and talk through these things or shoot me an email and I'll get right back to you. But the purpose of today's meeting is obviously to make parents feel empowered over this process and to make parents feel like, yes, we are all overwhelmed and we recognize that parents of students with IEPs and disabilities are very overwhelmed. And the two simple, well, maybe in your head, phrase it or reframe it as right now what I can do is make sure I keep in communication with the school staff and always have a paper trail of those communications.
Mhm.
And if changes have been made, I know I need to look for that prior written notice or team summary. Now, Shanice, you had one more thing that I think would be great to close on. Making the school year work for you all year round. We're in the holiday season right now. It's smack dab in the middle of the school year. It is not a fun time. Teachers know it very well. We don't look forward to this time of year. It's just called the doldrums. What can we do as parents with students with special needs or students with disabilities right now to get ourselves aligned for ensuring progress towards the end of the school year?
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday. So this is the time for the parent reset, right? This is winter break coming up. Some people have New Year's resolutions. So time for the parent reset. One tidbit that I'm definitely going to give is just one, be forgiving of yourself as a parent, right? You're overwhelmed during the pandemic. Everybody's in virtual learning. You may be working from home, outside of the home, or have multiple children. Just everything 2020 just hasn't been the year for a lot of people. But be forgiving of yourself and allow yourself grace. After the new year and school starts, send an email to your child's IEP manager, IEP chair, special educator teacher, special ed teacher, or principal and say, hey, I just wanted to check in to see what we need to do to prepare for the end of the quarter or this part of the year. Could you please forward my request to all the IEP providers and CC me? So this email is the way that you can collaborate and build relationships, right? We're really big on relationship building, but you can collaborate with your school to see what hasn't been done, maybe what you need to do to kind of help make sure that all the goals in the IEP are being met. But also, if there are some services or accommodations that have not happened or are not happening, you're able to see that without flipping through 50 pages or 100 pages of your full IEP. If you need to communicate about accommodations or receive supplies, I know, for example, for my son, he has to have manipulatives for math. And in this scenario, I would have said, we don't have manipulatives. What should I get? What do I have? You don't have to go out and purchase them. The school should have them. So you can probably arrange a pickup at your child's school to pick up those supplies or arrange to have it mailed to your home. So that's just a way to get your mind rolling about what you need. But it's also a way for you to not put more pressure on yourself and say, I have to look through this entire IEP. I don't understand what I'm reading. This is so much. I don't understand because an accommodation and a service, you may not know the difference as a parent, even though it has been explained to you during the meeting, and you may not think of it at that moment. But send out just that one email and have your IEP chair or your IEP manager or your special educator reach out to the service providers and say, hey, can we get a check-in? This is just a check-in to see how my child is doing or how the student is doing. Are we doing everything that we need to do? have we involved the parent in things that they need to do? Are there miscommunications? It could be that you missed a notification or communication that your child needs to do something. So it's just never too late. That's really what I want to stress. It's never too late. It's always a time to move forward. And you can use this as a way to kind of set you up for the next quarter, then for the end of the year, and then for the summer. I think sometimes as parents, we forget that the IEP is all year round, right? It's not just, if you're in Maryland, it's not just September and June and maybe a couple of weeks in the summer. It is all year round. There may be some other stipulations and changes during the off school year, but this is all year round. So you can make this work for you. If this is something that you want to send out, winter, summer, spring, and fall, right? It's something easy. You don't have to really think about it. Set a reminder on your calendar that every quarter or every mark of a new season, you send a check-in to see progress and how your child's doing and what you need to do. This is also be a reminder that you may need to hold a team meeting, or a reminder that you haven't received any notification. So you've gone this entire school year up until January. Have you received the progress notes? But that will be a reminder for your school to make sure that they have communicated well. And also request IEP team meetings. You can put it on the calendar, in their calendar, that you're going to request an IEP team meeting before the annual review, beginning of the school year. For me, what I do is I do a fall check-in for IEP. So I'll send an email the first day of school or the week before school starts and say, I want to hold an IEP team meeting. Why? My child has a new teacher. Most of the time, whoever the general educator, they don't follow your kids, right? So whenever they're in a new grade, they get a new teacher, which is supposed to happen. But you want to have that line of communication open with your teacher. You want to see what the expectations are for the school year. How did we do last school year? What are some of your concerns? Then you want to check in. And this is also an opportunity to say, hey, I know that you're only supposed to report out to me 4 times a year. That's not enough. Can we change it and have the frequency change to every other week, once a month?
That's something in the
yes,
IEP.
You can have that in the IEP. So that's why I say that's a beginning of school year place, because you can set those expectations. Then you can do another one when you receive progress reports. That just may be an indication.
Mid-November, you should have received at least one set of progress reports.
Yes.
With your report card by now.
So you'll say, okay, I've received the progress reports. Can I'm requesting another IEP team meeting to review the data, to review the information. That's an opportunity for you to make changes. And then the same thing at the end of the school year. Everybody's on winter break. You have time, like I said, to decompress and to really just figure out what is needed. And if you have older children, kind of talk to your kids about what's going on. What do they need? What is working for them? I don't think I've done the best job at that, but I will certainly take winter break as a time to communicate with my child as well.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Shanice, we would usually recommend that starting around middle school. So, second grade, around middle school is when we would, as an educator, typically start inviting a child into the IEP meeting. That would be up to the parent's choice, of course, as the holder of educational rights. So it's wonderful to have check in with your child and say, what do you need more? What is working for you? What is not? But please remember, grace. Give yourself some grace during this time. Okay. One other thing, and I'm coming a lot from the legal side, which is kind of my job anyway, that you mentioned was the progress reports. And I had said that those are required to go out 4 times a year. If you see on the progress reports, there's typically a little checkbox or some kind of discussion box that describes whether or not the child is making progress to be able to meet the goal by the time the annual is due again. If that says no and the child isn't making progress, in this state, the school is required to hold an IEP team meeting to address that and make tweaks. So when you're looking at your progress reports, make sure to check and make sure that the child is on track to hit those goals. It's a 1-year goal, each goal. And if there's any indication that your child isn't making that progress and the school hasn't reached out, reach out and do that IEP team meeting.
And if they say that your child is making progress and you don't agree, that's another indicator.
No.
So, I mean, if it's really, and I will use my son as an example. If they're saying he's making progress in math, and then I give him the same math problem, and I'm saying he can't do this. I don't agree that he's making progress. Can you show me what strategies, what you're doing, what are everything, to help us to show me that he's making progress? It's on the responsibility of the educators at that point to show that your child is making the progress, especially if you don't agree to it. And I think that's another thing parents kind of hold in. We harbor that in. It's like, oh no, they said he's doing well, but I don't see that he's doing well. And no, say something or get an advocate. I mean, that's that time also to bridge that gap and get support. How do I communicate with my school that my child isn't doing well, but they're saying that they're making progress? How can I advocate and ask for more services? And you can certainly bring, like Katie said, you can bring someone in to your IEP team to help you navigate that process and ask those questions.
Yeah. As an advocate, it warms my heart when a mom brings her mother and her father and her husband and the whole family, and they have a right to be there too.
Absolutely.
Okay, it is 2:00 on the dot. Are there any other questions? I can't see that. Can you see anything else, Shanice?
No, just your information is in the chat. So certainly send an email to Katie if you have any questions. Katie will shoot them and pass them my way as well. And if you have any information and insight, we will be working on pumping up our presence on social media and being able to reach this community on social media as well. So look out for additional information. We do have a question coming in, though.
Wonderful. Let me just take this time to plug free 20-minute consultations with Beacon as well. You give us a call on our website number, free 20-minute consultations anytime.
And shout out to my husband, who is also like our tech, and Shop by Hendrix is helping us tremendously with the things that we don't know. So
lot of. Where's that question?
There you go.
How do you advocate for IEPs when a 504 is being pushed?
Oh, yes.
That's a good question.
Let's go there real quick. So 504 and an IEP, you can't see my hands, are two different laws governed by, from federal law. 504 is under Americans with Disability Acts, and it is light. IDEA, the IEP, is under IDEA, as I just said, and it is where you're going to be guaranteed things like individualization and services, anything the child needs to be able to access the curriculum. So if you are asking for an IEP and you're getting a 504 in response, the first thing you need to do is make sure that that request is in writing. So you have a written request in writing for an IEP evaluation. How can a school team say, no, your child just needs a 504 if they haven't done an evaluation? So start right there. So if they refuse to do an evaluation, which there is a 504 evaluation process, but it's just generally looking at a doctor's diagnoses sometimes. I've never seen testing done at the school level for a 504. Let me backpedal because I'm getting all fired up. If the team is looking at your child and saying that there needs to be an evaluation, and if there is no evaluation or the school is denying it, you ask for, again, your prior written notice. And there should be a deep discussion that happened during the meeting, IEP meeting, 504 meeting, planning meeting, SST meeting, or otherwise. Different schools, different districts call it different things, that describe why the school refuses to evaluate your child. So use that prior written notice again, as that's your power card. Mm-hmm. If there's not a good reason, then you can respond in writing and you can grab an advocate and you can go to bat again and say, this this is not, there's no data here to show that my child should just qualify for a 504. I hope I've answered that question. This tends to
Yeah, it's very tricky. I will say from a parent's perspective, it's never really explained in the best way by anyone, just because there are some intersectionalities, right, with the two services. But the number one thing to remember is that there has to be an explanation given to you as the parent from the school when they are pushing for one way versus another. And you have to be able to understand that. And that's when you can reach out to an advocate and see where you are in the process. One of my biggest strategies, and I'm going to drop a gem and give away one of my trade secrets like Katie did. You can literally ask your team, where are we in the process? Show a diagram. There's a diagram that is on a day in our shoes that shows the IEP process, and it breaks down the timeline given to IDEA. And the timeline also kind of includes the 504, right? From the time you communicate to the time you do evaluations, all of that. You can literally point to that picture and say, where are we in this IEP process? Where are we? And if you have not been given anything to sign to complete an evaluation, you know that you're not there yet. But prior written notice is number one. Number two, they have to be able to explain it to you. That's just bottom line. If you're pushing for an IEP and the school's pushing for a 504, they need to have that in writing. 9 times out of 10, once you finish pushing and you get to that point, you'll find that doors kind of will open up. Okay, yes, maybe we do need to have an evaluation. Okay, yeah, I do need to gather data to make this justification, because the schools have to justify. They have to justify why we're making a decision over another. And that gives you the opportunity to advocate. And like Katie said, if you find yourself just kind of in that middle ground, reach out to us, get your 20-minute consult done. We can certainly support you and help you navigate the process.
I just want to throw out one thing. If you are in this state of Maryland and they're telling you that a child doesn't qualify with that eligibility, often ADHD or something like that, or the district gives out 504s for things like that, remember, again, IEP is an individual. So there is no umbrella qualification. There are 13 eligibilities from IDEA. Child can qualify under, but if a child has ADHD, he isn't automatically filtered onto a 504 plan. That's not a thing. Right. That is something we've heard a lot here.
Absolutely. And they can hold teams in the summer. Don't get discouraged that you were asking for a team meeting at the last day of school and they say, oh, we don't hold team meetings. You can have a team meeting in the summer. You can have a team meeting. I'm sure there's flexibility. I don't know about the winter. I would certainly not support that, but when school has that long break, you can have a team meeting. This is all year round thing. I know a lot of parents have asked me, and I've experienced that during my first time. During my first experience, that was the first thing I heard when reaching out to the school.
That we don't do IEPs in the summer.
That we don't do IEPs in the summer.
Yes.
That's not true.
The summer is still on the calendar, and the timelines are governed by calendar days. So IEPs are done during the summer by law. I hope that took care of the
yes. They replied and said that this has been very helpful and informative. Excellent. So thank you.
Okay, very good. All right. Anything else? Should we shut down and make plans to meet again next quarter?
Honestly, I think, we can shut down. I don't have anything else, but just record everything. Have your documentation. Give yourself grace, parents. Be generous with yourself and forgive yourself. Don't be too I know it's hard to say don't become overwhelmed, but also trust me, because I'm in it too. I'm still in it. This is a never ending process. I've gotten this far, but allow yourself some grace. Don't beat yourself up if you don't feel like you've been on top of it as much as you should. Don't beat yourself up if you feel like you aren't as communicative as you can be, but certainly take the time to figure out what ways work for you to help be a part of the IEP team.
Remember that a parent is, a child when you're going through this process, a child's well-being is only as good as their parents' well-being. So use the holiday break to do some self.
Yes, some self-care. And self-care can be whatever it is that you need. I know self-care is hard to figure out, like, what is self-care? Sometimes that's a loaded comment, but just take the time to just decompress, like get off of the computer. Don't Google anything. The doctors tell you not to Google, like don't Google your diagnosis. The same thing with the IEP process. Don't Google it. Google to help locate an advocate or a lawyer if you need one, but don't Google how to do the process because it is overwhelming. It is daunting. It's discouraging. It's a lot of information out there. So don't get me wrong that the resources aren't helpful, but sometimes it may not be what you need at that moment. And you need to know your ABCs and 1, 2, 3s of this process. So
Okay. Thank you so much, Shanice. Thanks for
yes,
time.
it's nice chatting with you, Katy. Always.
I will talk to you soon, and much love and warmth to all of our people who have tuned in. And remember,
Yes, thank you for tuning in. Happy holidays.
happy holidays.